Welcome to episode 242 of the DFO Rundown, brought to you by Betano. 19 plus, please play responsibly. The game starts now at betano.ca. I'm Jason Gregor alongside Frank Saravalli, and we are inching closer. We're into the month of October, which of course means baseball playoffs. So, and Frankie's Phillies are in. Ty's Jays are in. So we'll talk about that a little bit. And we are 9 days away from the opening of the 23-24 NHL season. And we are going to do previews, Frank. So first of all, did you have a good weekend?
Yeah. Got back from Calgary on Friday night. And it was kind of a nothing weekend after that.
Yeah, well, Philly
calm
fans
before the storm, so to speak.
Yeah. Your team knew you were going to make the playoffs, and so now it's a matter of let's see what happens. Of course, MLB playoffs beginning tomorrow. I do love the new format, best of three. I always like the wild card. I get it was exciting, but it was one game. I thought it stunk, so I like a best of three.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of high drama because it means so much. You know, you lose the first game, especially if you're at home, and you're on alert the next day. Your season's on the line, so. It's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It goes quick.
And what's your thoughts on the Phillies?
I think the Phillies beat the Marlins and lose to the Braves. Well, that is the sober fan view.
Well, the Braves, I do wonder, because baseball, you never have time off. I wonder if this long of time off will actually hurt the 1 and 2 seeds.
So last year it did.
Yeah.
In this same format. I do think there's something to that. I also think there's something to the Braves having clinched a month ago. They clinched the division a month ago. So if you look at their results since then, they went on a significant downturn, and it's human nature, right? You take your foot off the pedal. It doesn't really mean anything. However, did any bad habits creep into your game, et cetera, et cetera? So I don't know. We'll see. The Phillies beat the Braves in the same spot last year. So, I don't know.
All right. Well, today we are going to, every show here, the next 4, we'll preview a different division in the National Hockey League. And we might as well start in the division of the Stanley Cup champion, Las Vegas Golden Knights. But we'll finish them. We'll start at the bottom. And, San Jose or Anaheim, I guess you pick your poison on who you think is going to finish 7th or 8th. I'm not sure there's much debate over somebody else finishing 7th or 8th.
No.
In this division, it seems a lock that it's going to be those two teams. I guess let's start with San Jose, Frank. And is there anything that excites you? Yeah, is there anything that excites you in San Jose?
No. I thought they were a really difficult team to watch, obviously, the last few years. And then it was basically just the Karlsson show. I think the one thing to watch from an insider perspective this year is how do they begin to tear down the roster a bit more? Like, they've got a long way to go, and it's scary because they're already at the bottom. But Tomas Hertl has 7 years left on his deal. He's 29. Logan Couture, he has 4 years left on his deal. I think Couture is a prime trade candidate. I'm sure teams aren't going to love the contract. And we know, of course, that the Sharks chewed up a retained salary transaction on Karlsson. So they've got Burns on the books for the next 2 years. They only have one slot left. It would make sense for them to leverage that one slot, even if it's for the next few years, to try and generate a significant return for Couture. And then when it comes to some other guys on their roster that'll be trade fodder this year, Anthony Duclair, probably a deadline deal. I could see someone giving you something for Barabanov, who's a pretty decent player, 47 points last year at only $2.5 million. They've been trying to move Kevin Labanc for years. He had a bit of a bounce back year, if you want to call it that, and then kind of finished strong. So I'm not sure if he can improve his stock. Mike Hoffman is a pending UFA as well. And that's sort of the extent of where things get interesting for the Sharks.
Yeah, they got a lot of new faces, right? Mike Hoffman, Anthony Duclair, You look at Philip Zadina. I think William Eklund's not a new face, but should be a regular in their lineup this year. Jan Ruda on the back end. Kyle Burrows on the back end. Mackenzie Blackwood in goal. So they have a lot of new faces. I really don't think it's going to improve them in the standings very much. I'm not sure how fast of a team they are. And last year, Frank, I don't know if they had much of a defensive structure, to be honest, from their coaching staff. So I'll be curious to see if that changes anywhere. Obviously, you mentioned they have a boatload of UFA forwards who have 1 year left. And, some of those guys will be looking to say, hey, can I have a good season and maybe get traded? And I'm not sure any of them will get you a lot, but San Jose, I believe the San Jose Sharks organization had never really fully bought into their rebuild. I think this is year one. I know they've already missed the playoffs 4 years in a row, but I think this is going to be year one. And as I've talked about many times, it's usually 8 years because they don't have a ton in the system right now, despite them missing the playoffs the last few years. They've, a lot of their top picks are really small, and I'm not sure they're all panning out. So this is year one, Frank. I think this is the start of a real long, tough stretch for San Jose Sharks fans. They got one of the richest owners in the league, so it shouldn't be a problem. But, I think crowds in San Jose are going to show it. And this is going to be a tough time. I think Logan Couture, you're bang on, right? Would a team take Logan Couture at half price? $4 million for 3.5 years, let's say, gets traded halfway through at $4 million with the cap going up.
Someone's taking that for sure.
Yes, 100%. And right now they already have $7.5 million in dead cap space, either retained salary on Burns and Carlson or buyouts from Martin Jones at a really small amount from Rudolph Balcers of $300,000, which ends this year. And then, next year it jumps down a little bit, but they're going to be in a rebuild, and you watch, they're going to have, $10 million, I think, next year over in dead cap space just from, getting rid of some of their veteran guys. And it's going to be a long haul for the Sharks.
It's kind of a bizarre summer because for a team that should be trying to tear it down, they added pieces that theoretically, they're not going to improve significantly in the standings because there's a limited upside or upward mobility in their own division, which we'll talk about. I think this is the hardest division in the league, but they definitely it's going to prevent them from truly bottoming out. Jan Ruda had a tough year in Pittsburgh, but I think he's a pretty good defenseman and probably will help things. And Philip Zadina is, I don't know what he's going to be, but he's super motivated. There's no question about that. And Anthony Duclair and Mike Hoffman and LeBanc, all these guys are playing for contracts. Barabanov. You've created this dynamic that in theory should help you get better assets and picks, but in the short term might actually prevent you from getting a better pick this year. Does that make sense?
Potentially, but I'm not sure. Keep in mind, they lost Erik Karlsson, right? So all those other guys, no one's making up for Karlsson directly. Maybe they improve in small places elsewhere, but yeah, the motivation for the Sharks is, and that's why I said they were never really into rebuild until now, because they kept getting, but the thing is, Frank, they don't have young guys that they could even give opportunities to. That's their problem.
That's all I'm asking is, what is the plan?
Mm-hmm.
What is the cohesive plan? It's what I see is something scattershot that's being put together that they're not really sure what they're doing. Are they getting better? Are they trying to get better? Are they getting worse? Are they tearing it down? That wasn't adding Jan Ruda and adding all these pieces is not a teardown. That's adding. Yeah. I'm lost. Just tell me what they're doing.
Yeah, well, they had to take on some salary, right, to move Karlsson, so that's part of it. But the Sharks, sorry, Sharks fans, I think it's going to be a long year for them. They will battle the next team, Frank, the Anaheim Ducks, and I could say the Sharks might finish 7th, depending on how long it takes for Zegras and Drysdale to get signed in Anaheim, because obviously those are, they're easily 2 of their top 5 players on the team, right, when they're healthy. So that's 2 significant players out of a lineup that isn't overly deep. So when you look at the Ducks, obviously their big move, they signed Alex Killorn at $6.25 million. So he comes in. They've got some young players.
For him, missing the first 6 weeks of the year too.
Yeah, man, not great. Radko Gudas, Ilya Lyubushkin, I'll say this. opposing forwards, keep your heads up. The Ducks got two really physical headhunters on the back end in Gudas and Lyubushkin. But, without Jamie Drysdale, you look at their blue line, like Cam Fowler, Gudas and Lyubushkin to me are NHL defensemen. But after that, Jackson, Lacombe, Lassie, Thompson, who they just claimed on waivers, Urho Bekaninen. Like, how many of these guys are NHL defensemen regularly?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fair question. I think it highlights the need to get Jamie Drysdale done. Look, it's been a grind. I don't think, as of this morning, I don't think they're anywhere closer on Zegras or Drysdale.
Why?
We're now 9 days, because Pat Verbeek is a grinder. He's going to grind you right out. That's his MO as a GM. That's what he's presented to agents, to players. And I think you had to overpay a bit AAV wise to get Killorn coming off of the year that he had in Tampa. And obviously Pat Verbeek knows and really likes Killorn from his days in Tampa. But I think the other younger guys are looking at that. Even though Killorn has won 2 Stanley Cups, they're like, he's 34 and he got 6.25 and you're going to grind me out on every dollar. I've been here. I've been with this franchise.
Yeah.
That part I think has been difficult. I'm interested to see what they do with Leo Carlsson, who I think is pretty darn close to being ready to step right into the NHL. But you're right. The defense is holding them back. And obviously we've already talked about the frustration with John Gibson. What do you make of the Lassie Thompson waiver claim?
Well, I wonder if that, I think they realize that they need help in their back end, but does this just push Drysdale even farther away? Because they realize, well, we got another guy. We don't care. Right. And I think Pat Verbeek, and if that's his stance, I don't mind it. Like he's being honest, but they don't have much negotiating rights. Frank, it's the one time they don't with no arb rights. And I've always said this. So I'm wondering,
when you have $16 million in cap space,
yes.
Why are you grinding them on arb rights? All you're doing is sending a message to everyone else that you're going to put the wood to them.
Yeah. I'm not saying it's right, but it's consistent. So at least, you just asked the question, what's the plan in San Jose? At least you know what the negotiating plan of Verbeek is. We can disagree with it, but at least we know what it is.
Yeah, and at least we know what the plan is for Anaheim. Like they're full-scale rebuilding, and they're adding pieces like Killorn, Gudas, and Lyubushkin just to make sure that their guys don't get beat up in the meantime.
Yeah.
That's it. They're support pieces. Their infrastructure, their scaffolding, however you want to think about it. They're guys that are trying to just prop up and hold up everyone else in what's going to be another lean year.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's and then John Gibson, you wonder how long he stays there. So the Ducks, where do you think they finish? 7th or 8th in the Pacific?
I think they finish 8th.
8th. Just okay. Well, now Zegras and the longest these guys can hold out is what, November 30th? Well, it's not hold out. That's the wrong word. Have a contract stalemate.
Yeah, December 1st is the deadline.
Yeah. I don't see them missing out on a full year. You might bite the bullet and just take a 1-year deal. But the problem with that is then when you go to arbitration, if you don't have a good season, well, now arbitration doesn't help you as much.
Yeah, I mean, they're up against it now. I mean, signing now barely gets you back for opening night.
Yeah. So now let's go to the Vancouver Canucks, who had 83 points last season in the Pacific Division, which put them 17 behind 4th place Seattle. So lots of ground to make up for the Vancouver Canucks if we assume Seattle's a 100-point team, and we can debate that. So
and 12 back of the playoffs.
Yes, and you look at the Canucks, and they made some significant moves, right? As obviously they bought out Oliver Ekman-Larsson, and this year it's a buyout that makes tons of sense because he's got like $146K on the cap. In 3 years, there's two, year 3 and 4 of that buyout, 4.7. They might not be loving it, but I understood why they did it. So look at overall top to bottom. When you look at the Canucks, what do you see?
Playoff team.
I think them in Calgary and Seattle, And, they're battling for the the fourth and fifth spot, because I do believe 5 teams in the Pacific are going to make it this year.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think those are the 3 teams right there. What order they finish in, I think you can just flip a coin right now to start the year. That means one of those teams is going to be out, though. One of Calgary, Vancouver, or Seattle, I think, is out.
Yes.
And I personally think it's Seattle, but we'll get to them in a second. I just like the changes Vancouver made. I've talked about this before. Their back end is so totally different than if you look at their back end to open last season. It just, it's you now have true bona fide competent NHL defensemen. And when you're asking Ethan Bear and Jack Rathbone and all these other guys to do stuff last year, that's Kyle Burrows. Like, I'm not knocking guys. It's just you were asking a lot. Ethan Bear played 61 games last year.
Yeah, he played 18 and a half minutes. So Ethan Bear, Luke Shen, who played 55, Ekman Larson, who played 54, Kyle Burrows, who played 48. They were third.
Riley Stillman played 32.
Yeah, so they were the number 3 to number 7 defensemen. They're gone. Quinn Hughes and Tyler Myers are still here. They brought in Philip Ronick, but he only played 4 games last year. So he's
don't overlook a full season of him.
Yes, Carson Soucy, Ian Cole, and then Rathbone, who only played 11 games last year. Him and Matt Irwin look like they're going to battle for the number 6 spot on the back end, right? And that's their defense. But it's, if you look at their top 5, 60% of their top 5 is new in Hronek, Soucy, and Cole. So that's a significant change.
Yeah, Hronek should be. So his career average is 42 points a season. He averages a half point per game, a little more than that.
Yeah.
So you get a full year from him. Soucy adds some real size, and you then have Ian Cole, who we talked to on Frankly Speaking. I highly recommend you check out the interview, and not just because I did it, but because the insight from Cole, I think, was tremendous. He was saying the reason he ended up signing in Vancouver is because he got a real pitch and sense from Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin, who he played for in Pittsburgh and won 2 Stanley Cups, that they're sick of losing. That was the pitch. We're sick of it. And you can tell when you go there, as I stopped in Vancouver last week, that they truly are sick of losing, and that it's time to make a statement. Cole has a personal 9-year playoff streak on the line. He's played on a team every year for the last 9 years that has an authentic chance to win the Stanley Cup. And he picked the Canucks in free agency and had plenty of other options. So I'm not saying that's the end all be all, but you can get a sense just from being there that they're serious, and they know they need a good start. They've acknowledged and talked about that. Their season has been sunk the last few years pretty early on. And I think a healthy Thatcher Demko is an absolute game changer.
Oh, yeah. He only played 32 games last year, and in the 32 games he played, he didn't have great numbers by his standards. Right?
I disagree with that, and I'll show you why. Okay, so he played from the season opener until December 1st, okay? And he told me on the pod that he completely tore his groin and almost needed surgery. During those 15 games, which ultimately, and I'm not saying it's his fault, ended up kiboshing the Canucks season, he had an .883 save percentage in those 15 games.
Yeah.
Okay, so wait. He comes back and finishes out his second half of the year in games played. 17 games played, finally fully healthy, 9-18 with an 11-4-2 record. For the first time this summer in a while, and he wasn't healthy, I don't think, going into last season. For the first time in a while, he's completely healthy and had a full off season to prepare. I'm picking Thatcher Demko to win the Vezina.
Hey, I like Demko, but it doesn't change the fact that his stats were 901 and 316 goals against. That's the whole season. We can pick apart why they were there, and I don't disagree that he was injured, and it was obvious that he was injured. But Thatcher Demko, A, he only played 32 games, and B, his average of a 901 save percentage, I'll guarantee will be significantly
but
higher.
It's an utter career outlier. I take it and I throw it right out. His last 2 seasons prior to that, 99 games played, 915 save percentage.
Yeah, well, that's what I said.
In the top 7 in the league.
Yeah, that's why I said he did not have a season that was close to what's normal for him. So he gets back to normal. I think that's automatic. 7 more wins just from him. Plus maybe more considering how many more games he's going to play if he's healthy. Like Demko's at least a 55 start goaltender, I think, for Vancouver.
I think that is supposed to be something like the split. Like I think they'd prefer to not have him playing much more than 55.
Yeah.
And that's going to be an interesting threshold to watch, not just in Vancouver, but I think throughout the league. How many teams end up playing their goalie more than 60? Some will have to be out of necessity. Like we're not talking Pacific today. We're not talking Central today. We're talking Pacific, but Colorado and Georgiev, he already played 60 some last year. Francouz is hurt. They're looking for another guy. He's probably going to be asked to play 60 again.
Yeah, not ideal. The one question mark I have in Vancouver is their bottom 6. I really like their top 6, Kuzmenko and Miller and Peterson and Brock Besser. To me, I have no problem with who their top 6 forwards are going to be. Beauvillier, I think, is a solid, decent top 6 forward. But I look at their depth guys, Frank, and now they did bring in Teddy Bluger and Priest Suter. And Priest Suter had lots of suitors. And, they got him on a 2-year deal at 1.6. The question there is going to be, Nils Höglander, Dakota Joshua, Giuseppe, Sheldon Dries, Jacka Studnicka, and then even, some other guys who the roster isn't filled out yet, like Podkolzin. What can he do? Is Nils Aman?
Podkolzin was already sent down.
Yeah. Aman's played 68 games last year. He only had, I think, 12 or 16 points. And I just wonder, is he even on the roster this year or is he better? Yeah.
I think they need Höglander to pop. I think that's the truth.
Yeah.
Connor Garland at some point will probably get an opportunity to play in the top 6, but the fact that he isn't right now and is looking like he might start in the bottom 6, I think is healthy for the Canucks. I think it shows you that their depth has improved. Suter, he's not going to wow you, but he still piles up some points every year. Beauvillier's at an interesting intersection in his career. Pettersson, obviously we've talked about, is highly motivated. And I think for me, adding someone like Teddy Bluger, 3rd line, 4th line center, whatever you want to call him, is the perfect addition. Their special teams are a big question mark, and not so much the power play. It's sort of been hovering around 9th to 11th, but their penalty kill is 32nd 2 years in a row, or 32nd and 31st.
Yeah.
Bluger is going to help in a big way with that.
You would hope so.
That's why they got him. So I don't really care if he gives you 10 to 12 goals, which I think he can. Can you take the penalty kill that was 32nd in the league? Just get to 16th. You're between an improvement on that end, a healthy Demko, and the back end that I think is significantly improved. That's a pretty easy way to make up 12 points.
Yeah. And the other guy, Frank, to me, kind of the wild card for their forward group, because when he played last year, he gave them really good value. He was on pace to be a 26-goal scorer in Mikheyev. And so if Mikheyev can stay healthy, which, and how can he perform coming off the injury? To me, that's like found money if he comes back and plays well.
And can Kuzmenko go and do it again? Kuzmenko, 39 goals, so almost 40 and 74 points last year.
Yeah, I think he can. I really like him as a player. Yeah, smart player.
So. And playing with Pettersson, he should be A-okay.
Now, did you pick Pettersson to finish 3rd in league scoring?
No, I don't.
No. Okay, because somebody
I don't get that granular, I don't think.
Yeah, somebody picked him to finish 3rd, and I was like, you know what? Yeah, obviously most people are assuming it's McDavid and Draisaitl. They're going to be 1-2, but I did find it, interesting that Pettersson, who, hey, he was
10th
up there
last year.
last season, right?
He was 10th.
Like he's a decent player. There's no question about it. So, what was he last year? I think he was
10th with 102 points.
Yeah. So
he needs to score a few more goals. Get him to 50.
50 goals hard, man.
I know he's at 39 last year.
Yeah. Like his wrist shot / snapshot is pretty deadly for sure. So I think, their back end didn't really produce a lot of points, Frank. They didn't move the puck up very well. I think that, outside of Quinn Hughes, of course, but I think that's where you could see some, a few more points for Pettersson if his D-men are moving the puck a little bit better up the ice.
Quinn Hughes, the number one puck mover on the back end in the whole league.
And hey, who I talked to guys in Vancouver.
That sounds like hyperbole. He literally completes more passes than any defenseman in the league.
Yeah. Oh, no, he's a good defenseman. I don't think there's any question. But Tyler Myers, I know it's only preseason, but there's lots of people in Vancouver that are really high on how Tyler Myers has looked so far.
I share that. I know it's only one practice, but I've paid attention in his preseason games that he's played. He's looked good. He looks like he's moving well, and his puck skills, I think, are excellent. So this is a big year for him. Contract year. It's a big year for the Canucks. That's why he's still there. They have a lot of tough decisions to make if they tank their season again in the first couple months.
Now let's move to the Calgary Flames, who had 17 overtime / shootout losses and missed the playoffs by 2 points last year. I think Calgary, and they had Jacob Markstrom at a brutal season. Let's call a spade here. He was not good at all. It's been very yo-yo-ish for him in Calgary in his 3 years. And the good news for Flame fans is that it looks like this would be the year, based on the past, that he bounces back. And if he has a good season, like even if he just has a 900 save percentage, Frank, the Flames make the playoffs. He doesn't have to be great. They would have made it. They had a lot of losses. They've had obviously some changeover there. The biggest one, I think, being their coach, right? Their back end still has Uyghur and Hannafin and Anderson and Tanev and Zadorov. So, their top 5D are good. I expect Jonathan Huberdeau, he's got to produce way more points than he had last season. They just signed Backlund to a 2-year deal. They gave him the C. So he's back now. Elias Lindholm, obviously, they're still waiting on, and their whole decor, except Rasmus Anderson and Uyghur, are all UFAs at the end of the season. So to me, the interesting thing about the Flames is, how does the season go? And if it's going well, how many of those guys re-sign?
I think you're going to see more and more. I think they're pushing really hard to get Lindholm done before camp breaks. They'd love to have that done before opening night. I think he's more open to it than he's ever been. And I think Backlund signing and then being named captain, he's like Craig Conroy's personal salesman now. He's just in there. And he said, I asked him about the idea of that. You can hear that later this week on Frankly Speaking, my interviews with Craig Conroy, Ryan Huska, Jonathan Huberdeau, and Michael Backlund. He was saying, like, I can't be over the top in trying to get these guys to re-sign, but he said, I'm definitely going to be mentioning it because he's someone that really was the first one to take the plunge in a year where a lot of people were hesitant and they're like, oh, I want to see what happens with this team. So I think he's going to be a critical piece. And he's also obviously coming off of a career year, so he's got some good hockey left in him. And I think the 2-year term for Backlund was perfect. But they're working hard to try and get Lindholm done next.
And the Calgary Flames have significant changes in their forward group. They are going, a lot younger. Toffoli's gone. Trevor Lewis, Milan Lucic, Brett Ritchie, they're all gone. And they've brought in, obviously in the trade, Igor Sharangovich is in. And then you've got the young guys like, Coronado, Jacob Pelche thinks they're going to play more. Walker Dewar did play last season. So to me, that's a changeover that their young guys might see even more opportunities this year.
I really liked Walker Dewar last year. I think the Flames have some pretty good players. Peltier, I think, can take a big step forward. I like this team. I liked this team last year, and that's you hit on some of the things. the overtime shootout losses, the 1-goal losses, the poor play from Jacob Markstrom, almost everything that could go wrong last year did. I think the only maybe scary part for Calgary is that all of those things went wrong and they were still totally healthy for the most part. So what happens if they run into some injury issues? I guess you could ask that a question about any team, but that would be one sort of lingering concern in the back of my head, is that everyone was healthy. I think the Flames are a playoff team as currently constituted.
It's hard to argue when you break down their numbers, because to me, I think the easiest thing is just get better goaltending. And if they get better goaltending, and it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't have to be great. Like Jacob Markstrom had such a bad season.
And it doesn't, I was going to say, it doesn't have to be just Markstrom.
No, Vladar.
If they get to a spot where Vladar, and if they trade Vladar, which I don't think there's been a ton of interest in the last, number of weeks. I just don't think there's teams ready and willing to spend for a goalie. We talked about how this is a copycat league and everyone watched Aiden Hill and what they spent. Teams feel like they don't have to. We'll see if that changes this year. But Vladar in a perfect world is playing somewhere else, and they get a second round pick for him. Wolf is ready. But in the meantime, Wolf is waiver exempt, and the plan is, at least if Vladar is still there, to send Wolf to the Wranglers and have him play a bunch of games until they can figure out what to do. But my point is, if Markstrom can't do it, if he's not able to be the guy that bounces back, and he doesn't need to be 922 Jacob Markstrom that he was 2 years ago, but 892 is no good. And if he could be somewhere in the middle of that, the Flames are a playoff team.
All right. Well, I think it's going to be difficult, Frank, to have 11 overtime losses like they had last year. That's hard to match.
How many blown third period leads did they have? I mean,
oh God,
it was an ugly situation last year, and the vibes are different this year. And the players, a number of them use the term underdog, especially in their market. I think you and I and outside people are like, oh yeah, Calgary's probably a pretty good team. That market, they're not expecting much. And I think they're an underdog in their own market.
Yeah. I think they're, Vancouver, Calgary, and Seattle, who we'll get to. But first, we're going to bring in Tyler Yaremchuk, as we are in the middle of the Pacific Division preview.
Yeah, giddy up, boys. I got a Pacific Division themed edition of Fill in the Blank. And as always, it is brought to you by our friends over at Betano. They got a couple of interesting prop bets when it comes to the Pacific, but one of them that I wanted to float your guys' way is this. There is a blank % chance that a Pacific Division team wins the Stanley Cup for a second consecutive year. Blank % chance the Cup winners from the Pacific. Gregor, what do you say?
Well, I think Edmonton and Vegas would be, two of the legit Stanley Cup contenders. I'm not sure the other teams. LA, maybe. But so if we say there's 7 legit
you said the other day there's 10. You had 10.
Yeah, I thought 10 teams that have a real, but I wouldn't say legit. There's always a few surprises, but I would say 2 out of 7, so whatever the odds of that is, 30, just under. So yeah, that's what I'll say. I'll say 28% chance.
All right, Frank.
I was gonna say 30. So the math you did was kind of exactly how I was thinking of it. So I'll say 25.
Yeah, so just as good of a chance as kind of every other division, it would be the answer, right? Kind of average. Betano has them at plus 240, which is implied odds of 29.14%. So there you go.
So above average, right? Yeah. So that would be what I would think. I'd be curious how many other ones are higher.
Yeah. Good job, Frank. You really put a stake in the ground saying 25%.
25% out of the 4 divisions. You nailed it.
So you're saying there's a chance.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get to the other divisions, or I guess I can give you the answers now. The winning division, it's the Atlantic, who's actually the favorites at plus 225. And
that's
then
because they're drinking the Maple Leafs Kool-Aid.
Yeah. And then the Metro at plus 260. And according to the betting odds, the division with the least percent chance to win the Stanley Cup is the Central, which
is crazy to me because first off, my cup pick is coming out of there, but also like don't sleep on Carolina or Colorado, the wrong C team, Colorado.
Yeah,
fair enough. You guys started at the bottom here, talked about the Ducks and Sharks. That ties into your next one. Blank will finish last in the Pacific Division. Frank?
I'm going with the Ducks.
Ooh, really?
Yeah, I just think the Sharks like oddly like improved on the margins, and I don't quite understand it, but sure.
Yeah. I will take the San Jose Sharks. I think Zegras gets signed eventually, and that jumpstarts them. And I like the Ducks' physicality on the blue line. At least it'll be entertaining to watch. I'll say this: Bushkin hits like a train, and Radko Gudas is nasty. So opposing forwards will keep their head up with those two on the ice.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I'd have the Sharks coming in last as well. I think there should be some sort of excitement with that Ducks roster this year. Moving along to the third one I got for you guys. Blank will see their point total rise the most from last season. Just a reminder, Vancouver finished with 83. Calgary finished with 93. San Jose 60. Anaheim 58 if you're in the mood to pick one of those. But Blank will see their point total rise the most, Greg's.
Yeah, I'm going Vancouver. I think this is probably the easy pick, Captain Obvious, just because they got the most room to grow. Like Vegas and Edmonton, how much more points can they get? Seattle, I don't see getting that much of an increase, or LA. So I will take the Vancouver Canucks. I think they will improve by at least 12 points.
Agreed. I think they're definitely the team with the biggest upward mobility.
Fair enough. And we'll wrap up with this from our friends at Betano. Odds for Major League Baseball's wild card round. Frank, your Phillies, massive favorites against the Marlins, coming in at minus 182, but you can get them at plus 180 to sweep the series against the Marlins. And then my Toronto Blue Jays are slight underdogs rolling into Minnesota to take on the Twins. They are even money. If you believe in the Jays' ability to sweep the series, you can get them at 3-1, which I'm tempted to do, but I know I'm just being an absolute homer with that. We'll see. Maybe a Jays-Phillies World Series, Frank. You never know.
Yeah, I don't think so.
All right. That's a wrap for me in this week's edition of Fill in the Blank.
Yeah, that would be tough. Although, that probably benefits Toronto. They're starting on the road because they have been meh on home field this year. So, and honestly, them kind of tanking the last few days, Frank, they finished 6th instead of 5th. They play a Minnesota team that has 12 fewer wins than Tampa, who would have been the other team. And I know Tampa's banged up, but in theory, it might help them at least win a round.
This Jays team was kind of a frustrating one to watch, if I'm saying it politely. And I just have big questions about the Phillies too. Like their bullpen to me really scared me over the last 6 weeks. They didn't really get it together. Their bats have been hot, and I think they can get hot. They have the starters with Wheeler and Nola. Just the bullpen to me, giant question mark.
Now, let's get to the top 4 teams in the Pacific last season, finishing 4th, the only division with 4 100-point teams. The Seattle Kraken in their second year had 46 wins, finished with 100 points. Really good season for them. Frank, do you see them repeating as a playoff team? And what concerns you, what interests you about the Kraken?
Well, they certainly can repeat as a playoff team. And when I say that I think they're going to be the team that misses, it's one of the more bold picks that I'm making, because not only did they get in, but they won a round in Game 7 and then took the Stars to the Game 7 almost to go to the conference final. So to turn around and say that this team isn't going to make it, it's pretty interesting. But I just think they had so many guys last year that had career years that I think it's going to be difficult to duplicate. They had 6 20-goal scorers last year.
Yeah.
Can Jordan Eberle do it again? Yeah, I think he can score 20 again. Can Bjorkstrand score 20 again? Sure. Will Jared McCann score 40? I'd be very surprised.
I'll say this about McCann, man. Ever since coming to Seattle and getting opportunity, like he's been good. So, he went from 20.
It's just a math thing here. And here's why.
Yeah.
He shot 19% last year. His career average is 12.1. His average in just Seattle, including the 19%, is 16.4. He's very likely to have a regression. And
Possible.
I know I'm not reinventing the wheel when I say that, but like let's subtract 10 and say he scores 30. And let's take away a few points from some other guys. But that's not really the entire basis for why I come to this conclusion on the Kraken. I just don't like their goaltending, and I haven't since they got there. I've been consistent in that.
Yeah, no, that to me is the big question. Seattle scored 100 points despite having an .892 save percentage combined amongst their goaltenders. Like
it was actually .890.
Is it okay?
Yeah.
They're .890. Sorry, LA was .892. Martin Jones started 42 games. He was .887.
He played the most games on the team last year, 48 appearances, and he's now the third goalie for the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah. Philip Grubauer, who was injured, started 36 games, .895. Joey Decord, who only started 4, he was technically their best goalie at a .900 save percentage. So, we talked earlier
Joey
about...
Decord might not even... Is he going to be the backup this year? I guess he is. It's between him and Dreger.
Yeah. Like, my point is, their goaltending doesn't have to be great to be better, right? So let's say they lose a few goals, get to a .900 save percentage. Like that can be a significant difference. And that can, if you think some forwards are going to score 10, 12 goals less here or there, if your goaltenders can average .900, that's a pretty big jump up for your team. And then that kind of
what would allow you, I get what you're saying. What would give you the confidence to say that they're going to get there?
Well, Grubauer in the playoffs. Grubauer in the playoffs was really good.
Okay.
Right. And so, and we've seen
like he still only had a .903. Like, was he that good?
I thought he was pretty good he had a few bad games, but not necessarily bad where they got lit up, but in a lot of the games, man, I think they won the first round because of Grubauer.
Okay.
And so at least to me, it shows he's capable of being better than he was in the regular season.
That's 5 of his 14 games in the playoffs, he gave up 4 or more.
Yeah. Did you watch those games though? Like Seattle played run and gun, man. It was because that's what they were good at. Like they could score 5-on-5. And
they only won 1 of those. They were 1-4.
Yeah. And I don't have Seattle making the playoffs, so I don't want to come across being a defender. I just think Seattle, I agree with you that offensively, when you have that many guys that are all going, there's a chance some get injured, whatever you have, that it might be difficult. But their coach does roll 4 lines maybe better than any other team in the league. So it allows guys. But are they going to have somebody on the 4th line score 21 goals like Daniel Sprong did last year? I highly doubt it, right?
It's not just Sprong. That's really the craziest part about their team is the depth scoring. They had basically 14 guys with 30 or more points.
Oh yeah. It was great.
Like Ryan Donato, he had 14 goals. Yanni Gourde, that number should go up a bit. He had 14 goals. Vince Dunn had 14 goals from the back end and 64 points. Ellie Tolvanen comes in as a waiver claim, 16 goals. Will that happen again? Probably not.
Well, 16 and 48. So could 16 happen again all year? 100%. But yeah 16 and 48, that puts him on pace to be close to a 30 some goal score, right? So 35 goal score, give or take. So no, not 35, 28. So even if he's only 22, that's still a pretty good season.
Basically, their entire roster last year had 20 points or more. I'm talking, they had 18 skaters with 20 or more points. That's bananas.
It's good depth.
It's great depth. And could they do and duplicate part of that? I think they can. Can it all come together in spite of an .895 save percentage? I don't see, and I get what you're saying about the playoffs. I look at Philip Grubauer and I say, okay, the last 94 games you've played, .891 save percentage. I think you just are what you are at that point.
Fair.
But maybe I'm wrong.
Well, you look like
I've been getting trashed on social media with my Kraken take. Kraken fans are like, you're an absolute clown. And that's fine. It's just, if I think there's 5 teams that make it from the Pacific, one of them's got to be out. And I think the easiest path to, from 100 points down to, let's say, 92 is just the Kraken having a good year, but not a great year.
Well, Brandon Tanev, Daniel Sprong, 21 goals, Ryan Donato, 14 goals, and Morgan Geekie, 9 goals. They're all gone. That fourth line was really good for them last year, and they're all gone. And they're essentially replaced by Kyler Yamamoto, Cole Lind, Pierre-Edouard Bellemare, right? That's who they've replaced them with. So
good luck.
Are they going to get the same production there? Probably.
I just don't I think Yamamoto, physically, there were things wrong with him last year. I also think his confidence is completely shaken.
Maybe. Now, what about Shane Wright? Yamamoto,
ability. Though, by the way, kind of going home-ish. He's a Washington kid.
Oh, yeah. No, that's the closest to for him. Like, it's a going home. But what do you make of Shane Wright? And are we going to see Shane Wright play a significant amount of games for the Kraken this year?
I don't know about Shane Wright. He just wasn't I watched some of their Calder Cup games. I just don't think he's there. Will he play some games? He probably will. I think he's got a long way to go, is the easiest way to say it.
And then my next question, Frank, is this a trial period by the NHL? And are we going to see more players follow in the footsteps of Shane Wright as far as getting no? So
this is a one-off, rare exception.
Yeah. Why do you think he got it? And for those who don't know, he got an exception that he can play at 19 in the American League, being a CHL player, which normally you can't.
I don't really get why he got it, because I don't even think he's the best case in the minors to get it, or the best case for a guy that might not make a team. Yeah. I don't know. It's a really tough one. Matt Savoy is the same situation. Picked, I think, 5 picks behind Wright. He was the 9th overall pick. He spent more time, more games in the Dub than Shane Wright has.
Yep, in the O.
He's in the Dub, yeah. Oh, sorry,
no, that Shane Wright has in the O.
Yeah, same idea. I just think when you line everything up, age, he misses it by 1 day. 1 day. He's born on January 1st. 1 day earlier, December 31st, and he's playing in the AHL this year.
Yeah. So
that's a tough one.
Yeah. No, although I'll say this, Frank, we have a long history of players playing their 19-year-old season in major junior and going on to excellent careers. The garbageest take ever is that you have to rush teenagers and they've got to play against men. Shane Wright hasn't dominated the OHL to the level that we've seen dominant players dominated at. He simply hasn't. So good for him. If they think this is good, he's going to get paid like a pro. But I hope this isn't the start of teams applying for this, because I don't believe that it's the best thing.
Okay, well, this is a tangent, and I don't want to go off on a deep one because we still have more to get through in the Pacific, but I think the whole NHL-CHL agreement needs to be blown up. I'm sorry, but the needs of major junior teams being put over the needs of NHL franchises is absolutely, utterly insane. And I don't care about small market operators. I don't care about propping these leagues and teams up. Doesn't matter anymore. It shouldn't matter anymore. That's a 1960s, 70s, and 80s thought process. This is a $1 billion team. Each of these teams, essentially with the Sens getting $1 billion, are $1 billion enterprises. To care what the Kingston Frontenacs, or just to pick a random team, whoever it is, the Wenatchee Wild, I don't give a shit what you think or what you need. The best place for Shane Wright to play is probably the AHL.
Yeah, I'll disagree.
Why? He's under team control with team coaches that are in his own organization telling him exactly what they want. He leaves, goes back to the OHL, for instance, let's say, which we know isn't happening. He's not in your organization anymore. Someone else is developing him with a totally different set of goals and circumstances. And it's not to develop him, it's to win.
Yeah. Okay. So then let's look at the track record of NHL teams who are these. So I don't care if it's about developing their own player, because most of them aren't smart enough to understand that teenagers aren't ready, and it's physically not ready. It's mentally not ready. And they rush
AHL. If you get rid of and as soon as you draft a player, you can immediately put them in your AHL team. All of a sudden that league becomes a lot better. First off.
No, because they're not. Go look at Frank. Go look at the 20-year-olds in the AHL who get their ass handed to them.
Yeah, but I'm saying
a year later,
what going to do, adding more 18, 19, and 20-year-olds in the AHL is going to bump out a lot of those older guys that are just career AHL players that really have no business playing in a developmental league.
They help guys learn. These 18, you're still going to play against majority men, and you get your ass handed to you. Now you talked about Kyler Yamamoto's confidence. These guys have been big time scorers. They go to the American League and they get shit on because they're not physically as strong. I don't care if the AHL is still a good league. It's still men for the majority of them. And while they might not be as skilled and in a lot of cases not as consistent, they're just as strong outside of the elite players, of course, in the NHL. And all you got to do is look at the amount of 20-year-olds who came out of junior at 20 and got their ass handed to them and were never the same and never developed. And everybody's like, oh, look at it. And because there's way more of them. There's way more of them.
I'm just saying it's pure lunacy that we're picking the needs of major junior franchises. Oh, we need our star player back.
I don't even know if it's – I think it's protecting the NHL from their own stupidity, in my opinion.
I think that's the opposite of the case. I think this is the way it's always been. No one's ever really questioned it. They're like, oh, yeah, like CHL teams need to be propped up. They need their star players back.
But look at how many European guys, Frank, that can come at 19. They don't. They stay in Europe. Why? Because it's better for their development.
But I'm saying, what if you fundamentally change the whole AHL model? Meaning it's purely, truly, really a developmental league instead of just saying that it is. And you inject all of those players from every franchise.
Yeah.
If we really want to change the development model, that's how you do it.
Yeah. I'm not. It's an
interesting
thought.
The fact that Matt Savoy needs to go back to junior, because here's how you ruin the player is you present either NHL or CHL.
Frank,
that's
Matt
your
Savoy,
only option.
Just for the record, Matt Savoy didn't even make the World Junior team last year. Are you saying that he can't still benefit from developing in junior?
Yeah, I'm saying he's probably done just about 95 points last year. He's probably done just about everything he could do.
Well, they were a stacked team, right? So they beat up on some pretty weak teams. And I'm not down on Matt Savoy. I'm just looking at it. Here's a guy who didn't even make the World Junior team, and now we want to rush from the AHL. I don't think there's anything wrong with Matt Savoy.
All I'm saying is what you've created is the Sabres either need to keep him or send him to junior. Those are neither option's ideal.
Yeah.
And the fact that you don't have a choice, and the fact that Shane Wright was granted an exception, it's stupid.
Well, that part, I agree with the last part. I don't understand why I got it compared to everybody else. But I will say history says rushing guys to pro hockey is what more so ruins them. Now, if you want to change the whole league, you're talking a monumental shift that's much bigger than just having a few 19-year-olds in the A.
That's what I'd like, a monumental shift. The whole thing
right
needs
now,
to be changed.
Right now, the European guys aren't they have the ability to do it. And they don't come over and play a lot of them as 19-year-olds either because they're not ready.
Okay.
Right?
It's a good debate.
Yeah, it's interesting to see if it would change. It would be a monumental shift. But then I'd wonder if you have less men that you're playing against, how good is the league developing? Now you're going to bring kids that have maybe played 2 years in the A and they're okay, but they play against majority men and they get crushed. So isn't the age like lots of guys
balance the strike?
Yeah, it's funny. I've talked to a lot of players who tell me the jump from junior to the AHL is harder than the jump from the AHL to the NHL.
Okay, let's get back to the preview. Sorry for the tangent.
Hey, no problem. I love it. 3 teams left. The LA Kings, and they made the biggest acquisition, I think, in the offseason in the Pacific Division.
In the entire league, you could argue.
Pierre-Luc Dubois. Now, they gave up a lot of depth, But they get Dubois. They've got, some could argue maybe the best 1, 2, 3 center punch. I'm not sure if they have like a dominant number one center anymore, but they got 3 really good centers. Are the Kings built in your eyes to beat Vegas or Edmonton? Are they better?
I think they're built to give them a run for the money. Yes. Are they better? I think I know you could say this about every team, and we've debated this with almost every team. No team is making a gamble in net quite like the Kings. I like their D. I like their forwards. But Phoenix Copley and Cam Talbot as your tandem for a grand total of $2.5 million is a crazy, crazy bet on a team that has been a playoff team for 2 consecutive years, is on the upswing. Why?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say you're like, okay, Todd McClellan and Cam Talbot, clearly there's a trust factor there, right? And you're like, I like the way Cam Talbot played last year, which he was sub 900. He also wasn't healthy and hasn't really, like, to me, it's, can you demonstrate that you're healthy for a full year? And then Phoenix Copley, can he do it again? His numbers were just okay. 37 games played, 903, but he won a lot. What does it all mean? Tell me.
Yeah, I think he was like 24, 6, and 3.
It was crazy win percentage. But despite not having great actual save percentage numbers.
Well, you look at the Pacific Division, Frank, last year, even though they had 4 teams with 100 points, no question across the board, they had the weakest combined goaltending of any division, right? Logan Thompson, who played 37 games, had the best save percentage in the division, and he was 12th in the league. Then you went to Skinner, who was 14th. Then Copley was third at 903 in the Pacific. So there's so many teams that, we'll get to Edmonton, like you get to Vegas, like Aiden Hill came out of nowhere in the postseason. And so can he repeat that? We'll see. Maybe he's that late developing goaltender, which we've seen a lot of. But you're right about LA. It's a gamble for sure because Korpisalo came in, and even though Copley had played well in one of those games, the minute they got Korpisalo, he became their starter, right? So last year they said we like him better, and then this year they just didn't like him better at the contract. So I think LA, if I'm not mistaken, has the least amount of money between their 2 starting goalies combined in the NHL.
It's like the least almost in NHL history. Like you'd have to go back to I think it was the Flyers in 2010 that went to the Stanley Cup final with Brian Boucher and Michael Layton. You won't find anyone that spent a combined less than that.
So either, Frank, they're going to get unbelievable value, or your questions, like a lot of others, are going to be like, yep, why would they go into the season like that?
So then is it fair to ask, though, up front, when you trade basically 3 players for 1, if they actually improved?
I think it's a fair question. Like they got the best player of the 4 in the trade, right? I don't think that's not many people. I like Gabe Velarde, but I don't think he's on the level of Pierre-Luc Dubois. So I'm kind of curious to see how Dubois does in LA. I'm assuming he's going to get the most offensive situations. I could be wrong, but when I look at them, you got, Fiala. Adrian Kempe has become a really underrated, 35 goal scorer. Trevor Moore. They've got a good top 9. Quentin Byfield, to me, Frank, is the wild card. Like he's such a big kid. And I don't know if this is the year, but I think at some point, eventually one year, we're going to see a pop from him. And when it does, like Arthur Kaliev on your 4th line is a dangerous shooter, right? Doesn't play a ton, but he doesn't need a lot of opportunities. I like the Kings' overall depth because the guys they lost down their lineup, I think they had enough depth to replace them.
Well, will Byfield pop?
Yeah, that's quite. I don't know.
I mean, he might not. Like the truth is, he might not. I'm not betting. Right. I wouldn't bet against him, but it is entirely possible that he doesn't. And Byfield ends up becoming the next
Alex Galchenyuk?
No, I was gonna say God, I'm blanking on the guy's name, the big center they got last year at the trade deadline in Edmonton.
Nick Bjugstad.
Yeah. Could just Byfield just become the next Nick Bjugstad?
Yeah, he's still so young. That's what's crazy, right? Like he's been in the league a long time, but he's still really young. And he's such a big, huge man that there's lots of data.
Bjugstad is 6'6". Like,
yeah.
And had some high pedigree. I mean, not quite as high as number 2 overall, but he was still a first round pick and came in and scored 24 goals in a season.
Yeah. Got a huge contract in Florida.
Yeah. I mean, it's
an interesting comparison, honestly, because I don't care what number you are in the first round, but what body type, size, everything. And it had a good year and then was never able to be the same. Byfield hasn't had that year yet. But the one thing that Byfield has the advantage, Frank, is he's going to be able to play with a Dubois or a Kopitar or a Deneau. So he's got a pretty good centerman either way.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah. So where do you have the Kings finishing in the
Unless
Pacific?
You want him to be a center.
Yeah, well, that's very valid point.
Isn't that the point? Don't they want him to be a center?
Wow. Yeah. Now Dubois can play the wing too. I know Todd McClellan was talking about that, so maybe that's what they do.
I think the Kings are pretty good.
Where are they finished in the Pacific?
Third.
So now we come to the top two who met in the second round. Vegas wins, goes on to win the Stanley Cup. Marchessault said, hey, they push us harder than anybody. And, neither team really made any changes. You look at Edmonton. Now they lost Bjugstad, Klim Kostin. They opted, Kyler Yamamoto. He's out. They basically, I think Dylan Holloway will take on more of a role this season. He'll be a full-time NHLer. So there's one guy who fills the spot. And then it's either going to be, Lane Peterson, Adam Ernie. Who else is battling right now for that spot? Brad Malone, maybe. Brandon Sutter just announced his retirement, so he's out of the equation there.
Does Lavoie make it? Yes or no?
Well, that's a really good question. Every game he's getting better, Frank, and so I think he's like Sutter retiring. I think really benefits Raphael Lavoie more than anybody, and so it's going to come down to the final 3 games. Now you play majority NHL rosters. And I want to see how Lavoie fares this week. I think, honestly, these 3 games are going to be the make or break for him. He bet on himself. I like it. Just took his qualifying offer, didn't take less, and away you go. So, one of those guys will be the new guy. Their defense are the same. Skinner and, like a lot of other teams in the Pacific, can Jack Campbell bounce back? He's only played 1 game in the preseason, but he was the first star. He was excellent in Calgary on Friday. Good news for Campbell. It's going to be hard to be as bad as he was last year at 888. Right? He doesn't need to be what he was the previous 4 years, average 916. I think that's really high. If he can be 905 to 908, Frank, I think they do cartwheels in Edmonton.
That would be humongous. Who plays more games and what does the split look like? Skinner plays more, right?
Goaltending, Frank.
Ken Holland said the other day in our Frankly Speaking interview series, the Oilers one drops later this week. He said it's going to be something like, his math was a little off, but he said something like 45-35.
Which would be 80, but I actually think it's going to end up being closer. I think Jack Campbell's going to bounce back this year. I really do. I think it's going to be like
and will Stuart Skinner be as good as he was?
Yeah, I think he can be steady. I think it's going to be like a 43-39, give or take. As long as both, obviously excluding injuries, because if there's an injury, then obviously everything changes. And I'm not sold 100% because 43-39 isn't a big gap. I'm not 100% sold that it's automatically Skinner. I think he's going to start. That's going to be their plan, Frank. But we've seen it across the league every year, man. Goaltending is voodoo. It's the hardest thing to predict. If anybody can predict it accurately outside of the top 5 goalies, I give you credit. Like, tell me who's going to be the breakout goalie this year. Somebody might guess and they'd be right, but it's going to be a wild card guess because honestly, I don't know.
I agree. Can Ryan Nugent-Hopkins score 104 points again?
I don't think so, no. Now the Oilers power play, I don't see it slowing down. So he's very important on the power play, gets a lot of puck touches. So I could see and if he only, and I say only, If he only scores 90 points, it's still an unreal year for him. His career best was 69 prior to last season. Like, that's a 35-point career best season at his age is so unheard of that it's, to me, it's just obvious to think that there'll be a regression in points, because I think Evander Kane, if he plays, he only played 41 games. If he plays more games, he's going to get a few more points. Like, the Oilers already led the league in scoring last year, right? So somebody's going to, give or take some of those points. And so I think it's going to be Nugent Hopkins.
So I asked the biggest Nuge fan on the planet, our guy Bagged Milk at Oilers Nation, what is your Nuge point total this year? And he said 70.
There you go. So I think that's a little bit low if he stays healthy, just because the power play. Like, Nugent Hopkins is going to score at least 45 points in the power play.
I think the linchpin to the Oilers offseason was Brown. Now, instead of having 5 legitimate, excellent forwards, you have 6.
Yeah.
And I think that makes a big difference.
Yeah. He he plays a very similar style to Zach Hyman, as far as he's just an energizer bunny. He's always going.
He's relentless. Yep.
And so it fits in with what Edmonton wants. And the other thing, Frank,
it fits in also because he's on the right side. Like, that was, if there was one hole left for the Oilers in their top 6, that was it. Yeah,
by far. So
and the McDavid relationship and the way the contract is structured, only 75 on the books this year. You're probably going to he's going to eat all of your cap increase for next year, which is fine. But that's okay.
Well, but
you worry about that next year.
Yeah, you'll worry about it next year. And I'm not sure he'll be here next year, because he's already going to be 3.25 as dead cap space and bonus overages. And if you re-sign him for 4, it's like he's a $7 million player for you next year. It's going to be tough.
Depending on what he does this year, maybe you make an argument that he's worth that. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. No, he might. And the other thing I don't think you can overlook is Connor McDavid. I don't think Sidney Crosby was just blowing smoke. I think McDavid, like, that loss to Vegas last year was a kick in the gut, kick in the nuts multiple times for them. That really hurt way more than the Colorado series. They weren't close. Colorado spanked them. They were infinitely better. They were very close with Vegas. And I think you can argue that at times Edmonton beat themselves in the second periods of games 5 and 6. Frank, I keep hearing this notion from people that, well, the Oilers, McDavid and Draisaitl have to score less for them to win. It's the most idiotic statement ever. All you have to do is look at Leon Draisaitl's final 35 games last year.
The next person that says that should just be slapped.
His shot for, his expected for, his goals for, his scoring chances for were all up by 5%, and so were his points production 5-on-5. Those guys, the crazy part is Connor McDavid last year, Frank, had his second lowest productive season 5-on-5 in his career. A second year, Connor McDavid scored more points 5-on-5 than he did last year. I think Connor McDavid, as good of a season as he had last year, he could have a better season. And it wasn't because of him, because his shooting percentage and his goals were up. It was the guys he was on the ice with. And you talked about Connor Brown. Look for Connor McDavid's 5-on-5 scoring to have a big jump this year, because if Kane's healthy and Connor Brown is in the lineup, that's a significant improvement over his 2 regular wingers last year.
Oilers win the division.
I would agree. And they end the longest drought in the NHL of not winning their division. They haven't done it since 1987.
I wasn't alive.
Yes. Islanders, by the way, second longest at 1988. So I agree with the order. So now you have Vegas, Frank, and Riley Smith and Phil Kessel are out. And that's really it. Like, they're bringing back the gang, which why would you argue when they won the Stanley Cup? And first of all, what did you make of Mark Stone's preseason comments? Pretty emotional, guys, all fired up, them and the Kings. He gets rocked on, by the way, I'm sorry, Mark, but that's a clean hit. You don't have to like the player.
I kind of I thought it was weak. It was basically him announcing to everyone, which I know is true anyway. I'm not going hard in the preseason, so therefore it's embarrassing that you are. And it's like, that guy's trying to win a job.
Yeah.
And a lot of people like Hayden Hodgson. I'm not saying he's going to be an NHL player or whatever, but he was pretty highly sought after a guy after an interesting year in a couple years in the AHL. He's trying to win a job. So I'm never going to fault a guy for working.
No.
And it's just interesting to me coming from 6th round pick Mark Stone.
Yeah.
A guy that never had an NHL career guaranteed and went on to become, this awesome player be a little more respectful. I didn't see
Yeah.
anything wrong with the hit.
I love the emotion, though. It's a preseason game. You don't see that very often. And Frank, if LA dresses Hodgson for the first game against Vegas, it's a storyline that's fun. I'm not sure it'll happen. I'm probably betting the odds it won't.
It kind of reminds me of that great Chris Pronger line. I forget. It was during the Stanley Cup final. Adam Barish, I think, won the cup with the Hawks and was like trashing Chris Pronger in a post-game interview. And on locker cleanout day, said something like, Adam Barish, the question was like, Adam Barish says he's going to get you next year. And Chris Pronger goes, where's that? The minors? And that was the end of Adam Barish.
Yeah. So Vegas, though, is there any areas of concern at all for you?
I know they got production and I know those guys were good. I do have some, look at the way their team is structured. Maybe they're the new model for success, but they've got such a top-heavy forward group that by the nature of the way their cap is structured, Eichel at $10 million, Stone 9.5, and then you've got Carlson, Marchessault, Barbashev all at 5+, that basically their last 6 forwards are all sort of bargain basement depth guys. And I think they, maybe it doesn't matter as much because they kind of proved that it didn't. And they've gotten some, like Brett Haddon had a great year last year, especially in the playoffs.
William Carrier, Keegan Kolzar, those guys are good value at 1.4.
Yeah, I mean, but Dorofeyev, is he going to be good? Is he going to hold down a full-time spot?
He's going to get a chance.
I know they re-signed Cotter, and I'm just, if there is a question mark for me, it's that. They've got a huge playoff from Michael Amadio, and he had a pretty good regular season. That's the bet for their team. Yeah.
The one guy, Frank, and he hasn't signed yet, but I think he will. Maxime Comtois on a PTO there. If you sign him for whatever it is, $800,000, $900,000, I think he can give you really good value. I think he fits in. I think the emotion of Mark Stone and those guys are going to elevate Comtois to kind of maybe reach more of his potential. Because
he's got all
2 years
the physical
ago,
gifts.
Yes, big, can skate. His motor, the pilot light isn't always on. And I think in Vegas, if your pilot light isn't on, the players will make you accountable.
Yeah. Just playing in the Fortress turns your pilot light on.
Oh, so I actually think Comtois might be a really good bargain basement deal for them.
Just playing in the Fortress makes you go from an overcooked noodle to a javelin.
It is a rocking place. So you have Vegas second then, right behind Edmonton?
Yes. That was a line, by the way, from Billions on Friday night, if you haven't watched it.
Ooh, I haven't watched it. All right. So we both see Seattle. Now, who do you have fourth, Frank? Calgary or Vancouver?
I have Calgary. So my Pacific Division is Edmonton, Vegas, LA, Calgary, Vancouver, Seattle, San Jose, Anaheim.
Okay. Mine's the same, except I have Calgary third, LA fourth.
God, I hate agreeing with you.
Yeah.
So you have Seattle out. I know you said it, but
yeah,
even after talking it through, you have them out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And honestly, I think they could be out by what we saw last year, 1 point in the East. I think
few things make me more nervous than agreeing with you.
Yeah, well, nothing wrong with wanting to be right, Frank. Nothing wrong. You're getting smarter. It's good. Yeah. I like it. Okay, well, we will chat Atlantic Division on Friday.
Thursday. What are Thursdays?
Thursdays this year. All right, Thursday pod. Okay, have a great week, everyone. We'll talk to you then.
Thank you for watching the DFO Rundown. Hit the subscribe button to never miss a show. And for more, visit dailyfaceoff.com.